everyone, today we are taking a look at the GepRC Tern-LR40. LR being long range and 40 being 4-inch props, but you don't necessarily have to want to go fly a long range in order to want a quad like that, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead and review this one. And yeah, we won't see just that normal sort of exploratory flat flying in this video. This has the DJI O3 VTX and camera in it, so I am using my goggles 2 in order to be able to show you the Betaflight OSD. The V2 of the original DJI goggles, the ones that look like Ant-Man, I believe those are also compatible, but I don't think they record the Betaflight OSD. And by the way, if you're not part of the email, newsletter, or solicitation marketing stuff from GepRC, I am. I got an email and I noticed that they have a sale going on from the GepRC website. Christmas 8 is the coupon, I believe. I'll make sure that, and I'll put it down in the video description down below, where you can save some money. And that of course, you know, that's not valid for products not sold at the GepRC website. You have to buy it direct from GepRC, and you have to buy it before or on December 25th, 2023. So if you're watching this way down the line, that coupon code doesn't exist. I'll go ahead and put a link to this product in the video description down below. This is a traditional long-range sort of design. We have skinny arms on an efficient prop and motor setup for long flight times. It weighs just a touch over 184 grams. I flew it on this as well as other 850 milliamp 4S batteries. And then with those batteries, it comes in at 280 grams. I also flew it for over 15 minutes on this 3000 milliamp lithium ion pack, which brings the weight up to almost 385 grams. The arms get more thin the further out to the motor you move, but here in the middle, it's somewhere around 8 3/4 millimeters. And it looks like 3.5 millimeter thick carbon. Top plate looks like it's 1.5 millimeters thick. We've kind of got two bottom plates, one that extend from the rear arms to the nose, and another one that extends from the front arms to the rear. The uppermost or rear bottom plate looks like 2 millimeters thick, and the front bottom plate looks like it's 1.5 millimeters thick. Motors are Speedix X2 1404 3000 kV, and the props are HQ T4 by 2.5 bi-bladed props. The all-in-one flight controller, which does use a USB-C connection, is the Taker G4 45 amp all-in-one. And that all-in-one has the ICM 42688P gyro. The GPS unit is the Gep M10 Nano GPS, and it picks up satellites quick, like in a minute. These are rubberized pieces that's supposed to do some dampening for the camera. Battery connection is an XT30. 3D prints here, 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 of course here. Holding a receiver, which mine is Express LRS, is also 3D print. And right there is a buzzer. This 170 millimeter strap works fine for 850 sized batteries, but if you want to use this big 3000 milliamp lithium ion pack, you need a 250 or thereabouts, but the kit didn't come with one, so I dug one out of my kit. It just happened to be GepRC branded. Comes with a few additional 3D printed mounts, some extra bottom foot pads, an extra 170 millimeter battery strap, an extra battery mat, and it is sticky. Comes with various extra screws, extra props. They include a mount if you want to put an external HD camera right up front here. You do also get a GepRC sticker that's carbon fiber. You get various sorts of paperwork on Betaflight and warnings and support. A big fold-out quick start guide in 2 languages. And last but not least, 2 sheets of stickers. Okay, what we're looking at here is my very first outside battery plug-in. You know, these satellites need line of sight so that you can reach the satellites, and you can see I've got a running clock with the red blinking dot. That's my recording. I started that as soon as I got a link between my goggles and the Vista unit. That takes about 25-30 seconds, and so you can see we've already got 4 satellites, and we'll have 5 satellites, and then we can arm and take off and fly. I'm not going to show all this flight, especially the slow cruisy flight, but we'll take a look at a sample, primarily the end. You can see there we've got 5 satellites, and we've been recording for about 30-ish seconds, and probably 30 more seconds outside of that. Let's move towards the end of the flight so that you can see how long it can fly. This is on the 3000 milliamp lithium ion pack. You can see we got the low battery warning flashing at us, and our battery voltage per cell is down to 3.354. These can be, lithium ion batteries can be discharged a little bit lower than our lithium polymers without damaging them. It's kind of their typical use. I think I think, I'm not an expert on lithium ion, but I think you can even go down to 3.2 on some of them. But I'm only going to go down to 3.3 here, and when you disarm, it'll come back up, and we'll get to see that. But this flight is going to go for well over 15 minutes. Of course, if you're flying in a bigger space and you're taking fewer turns, and maybe you have just a different environment, you could see well over 16, 17 minutes. I haven't used this lithium ion pack too much, so I don't think it's been abused or anything of that nature. But also note that there is some wind on this particular day, and I'm going to show you another flight with the 850 milliamp battery. And I experienced wind on both days. The second day with the 850 battery, 16 mile an hour winds with gusts up to 22. This one had winds of 12 miles an hour, but I don't think the gusts were quite as high. I failed to document it on this particular day. Let's move right near the landing here so we can see what our final flight time is on that large 3000 milliamp battery. All right, we're going to circle in and we're going to land. You can see by the end of the flight we had 9 satellites. Go back to the home screen to see our total time. 15 minutes and 50 seconds, and our battery is back up to 3.43 volts per cell, 3.44. I had changed the voltage warning a little bit. Let's go ahead and move into the tail end of the 850 flight. Okay, so this is actually in the afternoon, and this is when the wind picked up. The first flight that I showed you was, it was either in the morning. I'm sorry, I forgot to write it down. It was either in the morning because this is a Saturday, and I had 2 different flight sessions on this Saturday. I had like a 2-hour Saturday morning flight session after I took one of our kids to tennis, and then I didn't have any yard work, and then I did some more flying that afternoon after I took that same kid to dance. But again, it doesn't handle wind that well, and when we get into the faster flight, you may notice there's some things within the PID tune. I think they can tighten up a little bit. I didn't notice any difference between the 3000 milliamp and the 850 milliamp battery, that weight, to see if that one, the heavier battery would help it handle wind, and I didn't really feel that it did much difference on either case. You can see my VTX is storage full, as it likes to print on screen. Yeah, that flight that I forgot to dump off of the VTX pretty much filled it up, almost 16 minutes worth of flying. That's a long recording. I think they have, 32 gigs of onboard storage on those, and I do not have an SD card. Typically, I don't use the SD card. I just take my flights in and I dump them off of the VTX. If you're not familiar, the DJI O3, this is our goggle view. This is recorded goggle view. It actually looks slightly different for the eagle-eyed, but we can also get an unadulterated 4K view directly off of the VTX that's recorded. But that does not include the Betaflight OSD information. I include this because I think a lot of this statistical information for the flight is really important for those that are looking to part with their hard-earned cash and buy a quad that, in this case, with the DJI O3, comes in at almost $500. You can also see my goggle battery is getting low on this particular day. Yeah, that's a lot of flying. Those goggle batteries don't last that long in the goggles 2. And there's a shadow. I say this all the time, so I apologize to those that visit the channel regularly. I like seeing the shadow of the quad when I'm flying, and sometimes I kind of get vexed or zoned in on it. I have to be careful so I don't crash. When I do the faster flying, it's not, it's my faster flying. There are other pilots who are way more skilled and talented than me that will do more, but that will be the next flight up, which I already showed you a little teaser of. But we're coming in, we're going to land here. Our total flight time of 8 minutes and 17 seconds. And our battery, while not the healthiest, best battery in the world, it did pop back up. Quite a bit of battery sag there, 3.66 volts per cell. And this is our faster flight yet. Different day. Actually, I thought it handled the winds better this particular day. Maybe it's just the faster flight and it's less noticeable, but I felt as far as my flying it around, I didn't see the bobbles in the cameras that I saw on the other days when I was doing the slow cruising. Again, that could be speed. But I also felt like it wasn't pushing me around or I was having any troubles, really maintaining my typical lines. And that was another reason why I wanted to review this, is that I don't watch a lot of review content, and I haven't for a few years. I'm more likely to watch something that's much more off the beaten path, so to speak. As far as FPV stuff goes, than my counterparts. I kind of stopped watching a few years ago because I wanted to make sure that when I did a review that it was my own thoughts and that subconsciously I wasn't picking up somebody else's thoughts. It's not because I don't like them or anything like that. It was just trying to make sure that my own content, my own thoughts remain my own, and I didn't, inadvertently get influenced by seeing someone else's reviews, because, for a good number of cases, I'm not first. I'm usually one of the last. It usually takes me a while. I love the fence path. That's something else that I always talk about. I always just love that fence path. But I was talking about why I wanted to review this, because I've spoken to a number of you. Maybe you have a farm, or you just live in the country, or you've got a large property, or whatever the case may be. But a number of you have talked about wanting something that flew for a long time. It had GPS, but you weren't really looking for something that was all that acrobatic or powerful. So you wanted to do some explore. Maybe you wanted to go check on some cattle or some other sort of livestock. Maybe you just wanted to go check on your property a little bit. And it's, instead of getting on a four-wheeler and burning gas or whatever sort of energy, whether it's your own foot energy, you could just send up a drone, I guess, and go do that. And a number of people have indicated that. So it's not necessarily just for those long scenic flights down mountains or across, lakes or something like that. That's what we kind of oftentimes think of when it comes to long range. Some people want GPS on their drones just for the peace of mind, so they can have the latitude and longitude on screen. So if anything ever happens, you've got a beeper in this particular case. You can turn on the Betaflight OSD elements for latitude and longitude. So then if you do go down, something happens, what have you, you run into something, and you just lose your connection, whatever the case may be, you go down, you can go back to your DVR, you can look at the latitude and longitude, that'll get you in the neighborhood, and then you can take your radio with you can turn on the beeper. I would say the beeper, you're probably going to be with, 50 meters, maybe 80 meters. You might be able to hear a beeper depending upon the surrounding noise. It's good and loud. It's not a full-size beeper, it's a micro beeper, but you get to hear it in this video, so you can gauge that for yourself. So those are features within this quad that give someone the ability to have a little bit more confidence that if something were to go wrong, that you would be able to retrieve it. And, some people are just looking for super long flight time. They just want to put on one battery. They want to go out and fly for, some people want to fly for 20 minutes because they're used to those camera drones that sit and hover in the sky. This is running Betaflight 4.5, which I believe is required for these M10 GPSs, but they are fast, as I showed you already. Had GPS lock 5 satellites in a minute. That's pretty good, and it was faster every battery plug-in thereafter. Like 25 seconds, and I had 7. By the end of this flight, I think we have 9 again, and this flight isn't 15 minutes or anything like that. So, I think those M10 GPSs are a big improvement over what we've been using previously. And the fact that they mounted it up front on its own little podium, so to speak, that gets it out away from the DJI antenna. We've had problems with GPS on DJI-based drones with the O3s, whether it's some sort of interference from the antenna or it's electrical interference. I'm not certain of it, but I've experienced a quad myself that had all sorts of problems. So that is another feature of this design that really helps us out with GPS. Okay, my more aggressive flight has ended. You can see we got 4 minutes and 22 seconds, and our battery's in well good shape. I just want to hit this one more time. If you're flying an 850, probably an 1100, this 170 millimeter strap's going to be fine. It'll work out perfectly. But if you're wanting to fly a bigger battery, you're going to need a bigger strap. And my kit did not include it. I don't see it on the packaging list either. So that's something you should be prepared for if you should choose to get one. Our beeper is housed right here by one of the 3D prints, and I appreciate the fact that they've secured it down, not with just, double-sided sticky tape or something like that. And this has a very traditional design. I really don't have any problems with any part of the design. Like the front up here is metal. The rubber dampening that they have here, it's fine, I guess. I was seeing the whole quad and wind kind of move slightly, especially when those gusts would come up. So I wanted to highlight that. That's where I think some PID improvement could be shown. I think also if you were watching the faster, more aggressive flight, there was a couple of times where I came in kind of flat, and I thought the PIDs, my technique in coming in flat because I was kind of bailing out wasn't great. but I think it also had more oscillations there than I expected. So I think there is a little bit of a PID tune improvement that can be done for this, and hopefully that has a positive impact on its wind handling as well. This battery mat is nice and good and sticky. It's kind of hard to show, but they seem to be making their own. See how sticky that is? It's trying to come off. Anyways, it's sticky. I thought that was good, you know. It's a silly thing, one of those things I get stuck on. Also note the GPS unit right up in here. If you can see that little white connector by my fingertip, it's got a connector that connects the GPS housing to the rest of the wiring, and I think that's a pretty good idea, because if you were to come in under a branch or something and it were to catch and tear this off, hopefully it just pulls the connector apart and not the entire wiring, and down to your solder pads, and possibly pull the solder pads off. That's something that could damage the all-in-one, and then that's a big deal. That's a big expense. Of course, hopefully the rest of it makes it through the crash. I think I did highlight it earlier, but this is 3D printed up here as well. You can actually feel the layers within it. And yeah, I did have a mild crash. I don't think it's worth showing. I got tangled up in that tree that's kind of a horizontal based tree, and I just went down. My ground's not hard, and it wasn't a high drop. It's what, 8-10 feet tops. And the ground is nice and soft, so it didn't do anything. I couldn't turtle mode out of it. Well, I did turtle mode, but I couldn't get up out of it. I actually used turtle mode while I was sitting upright to try to chop some of the grass off, and you can see that around here. I already said it earlier, but USB-C on the connector for the all-in-one flight controller. We have gummies. They did use plastic nuts, it feels like, on the bottom layer. I would have preferred to see that be metal, but it's well protected kind of inside the body. It's a minor point. Now, there is a capacitor. Hopefully you can see it. Right down in there. It's right next to where the battery connector is, and this does a fine job. I don't have a problem with them having this little harness. I do wish that it were secured, and we could probably do this ourselves by just pushing this down a little bit and taking a zip tie between this post and our battery lead and cinching it down a little bit to this post. That way, if you do have a battery ejection or you lose your battery strap and the battery mat has lost its stickiness, that we wouldn't be pulling directly on our solder pads. Something I say just about every quad. There's only one or two companies out there that actually do that sort of thing. Mine is XpressLRS, and it did come with version 3 on it, so if you're running version 3 on your radio, you should be able to just bind it up. I didn't even flash the firmware. All I did was put it into Wi-Fi mode and then go in and add my binding phrase to the XpressLRS receiver, save, wait for it to come back up, and it's linked up to my radio. Bingo bango. Let's look at the bottom so we can look at what you would need to do to replace an arm. It looks to me like after you take out the 4 motor screws, then you take out these 2 screws. I think that screw is just... I think that screw is just for the all-in-one. So these 2 screws, your 4 motor screws, and then you can release an arm, put it back together. These pads are fine, but the thing about these pads is, and I've had them come off on my own quads because I used to use them years ago, but if you have any sort of momentum in any direction when you land, when you come into contact with the ground, these pads tend to either tear up or tear off. I, at one point in time, tried to use electrical tape to wrap them around there, and I did just a really bad job. They do give you an extra set. It's just one of those things that you should check after you land. Make sure your pads are well secured, they're not all chewed up. If that's important to come in and land flat, because once the pads do go away, then you end up rubbing on the button heads of all these screws, which are hex-headed, by the way. And once the head gets worn too much, then it becomes difficult or problematic to replace that screw. They do use these plastic sheaths. I've heard from others that over time these do lose their adhesion. I don't know that to be a fact. That's it's hearsay until I experience it, but I've heard it enough times that I can believe it. So if you were to have this quad or something else like it, one thing you could do is just take some electrical tape and wrap a single layer around there. That should help in order to maintain not just the adhesion down to the arm, but give it some extra adhesion to keep that out of the way. And the reason why they do this, presumably, is you hit something, you bend a prop, and the prop doesn't cut your motor wires, it hits this plastic instead. Hopefully your prop just stops and you don't burn up the ESC, but I already turtle mode in the grass and tried to fly out of the grass, and I couldn't get out of there, so I have confidence in the ESC that's going to be fine. It's a 45 amp ESC, So it's got plenty of overhead to do. VTX is right back here. It mine did ship, at least, with the little plug in the USB. You don't always see that anymore. And then we have our SD card right down there. All fine and dandy. On the other side is our binding button. The little gray button right in there. So always bind your goggles first. If you get the plug and play version of this, it can be used with the DJI gray remote. So you could fly it with that. I believe that comes with the Avata. I get that question a lot about this and the gray remote. So plug and play with the O3. You could use the goggles too, as well as the DJI remote. It just binds up. I presume that when you buy it that way, that they've already switched the receiver protocol over to S-Bus, and they've done that setup for you. But there's always a chance they haven't, because I haven't seen one of those setups from the company itself. So that's what you should get, and hopefully it out of the box just is set up the way you need it to, so you can bind with that radio. So probably oddly enough, the thing that I was most impressed with was how quickly the GPS got up and running on that very first battery plug-in. You know, a minute. I've waited 5, 6, 7 minutes in order to get 3, 4 satellites and be out in the wide open country and it not be the first battery plug-in. So that was pretty impressive. One note about it running Betaflight 4.5, if you have a configurator already on your computer, it's likely going to give you a message about how you're running an outdated version of that. It is always wise to keep the Betaflight application on your computer updated to match the feature set and everything else that Betaflight that's on your flight controllers uses. But I didn't update mine, and all the things I needed to set this up to fly worked just fine. It might not for you, though. I see this comes in a couple of different versions. It ranges in price from the analog version that comes in around $212, depending upon what receiver. You know, the price fluctuates a little bit. They have a RunCam Wasp, what we used to call the Link, the RunCam Wasp, which is also known as the Vista previously. It's also a product manufactured by DJI and gives you HD FPV. Is a little bit less expensive than this particular version. Comes in between $329 and $359, and then this bad boy right here comes in from $469.99 to $499.99. Did I say too many nines there? $499.99. And also on that solicitation email that I mentioned earlier, they have different tiers. Like if you wanted a GepRC product right now and you wanted to buy it from GepRC direct from their website, they have different tiers to where you can get 4 1102 motors, which 4 1102 10,000 kV motors would be perfect motors for one of my favorite analog builds, which is the Rocket Race. This little guy right here. I know it doesn't have GepRC motors on it, but I've used GepRC motors on it, and they work great. The tiers also have other things you can get for free, but that one caught my eye because 1102 motor, 10,000 kV, those you don't see those every day. But if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about the GepRC Tern-LR40 HD, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.